Good evening. Welcome to Protracking with Syphus. I nearly forgot what it was called. I had to check. Protracking with Syphus back again, and I'm going to do what I did last time. Start off with some music, give people a chance to connect if they want to, and see what's what. I think we'll follow on from where we were last time. Looking at Amiga PAL, converting samples, getting them into the Amiga at high quality. But we're back on the hardware tonight, back on the Amiga. Slightly concerned that this Amiga is circling the drain because this power LED's been flickering a lot, but we'll see how it goes. Got some spares and I might be able to do some repairs on it. Yeah, let's go. New version of Protracker here, an even newer one, but we'll talk about that. My gaffer tape keeps melting. It's holding my camera up. Never mind. We will find a tune. Let's see. I'm going to put all these tunes. You'd have thought I'd put them somewhere sensible. Put them in mod work. Yeah, I did. Okay. Let's have a Radix tune. One of my favorite artists. Hi there. Hi Kato. Hi Rog B. I was kind of confused. And I know somebody else's nick is Rob G. Yeah, Radix, who's more recently known as Mosaic, but has also been known as Rhymed Lego and a few other things over the years. Probably my favorite demo scene musician, one of my favorite composers generally. Let's have one of his nice tunes. So many nice tunes to choose from. One of my favorite of his is Paul the Penguin. It's a chiptune. It's a lovely chiptune. I'm going to play Paul the Penguin. So there you go. Oh, is this crashed again? All right. Hard reset time. Caned all the memory again. There we go. I like how quiet it is when the Amiga's turned off. Well, that was fun. Alright. There's what we want. Radix. Paul the Penguin. Most Amigas, other people's Amigas, are reliable. How's the levels? Okay. figured that out. Not very gracefully, but all these tunes loop forever, like they're supposed to. That's great. We'll do looping someday. Talk about that. Yeah, Roger B says that's the Amiga chassis is so clean. That is indeed how it appears. It's not really the case. Those keys are a bit manky, very manky. I don't go in for retro bright and all the other chemical means people have of making Amiga cases bright white again after all these years. Firstly, I don't think retro bright works for very long. People seem to end up with dirty cases again pretty soon. Secondly, I'd worry it could make the case brittle, which doesn't matter for most of my cases. Most of my cases have got holes drilled in them and all sorts of stuff going on. But mainly, you know, my Amigas all bear the scars of a hard life. Life on tour, life in aeroplane holds, life in bedrooms is the worst. Horrible things happen in bedrooms. But yeah, especially my Amiga 600, which we're not using tonight, because I've got some things to do that need more RAM and CPU grunt than the A600 has. We will use it again probably for chiptunes, and that's been with me forever. That's the one that's it's not a terrible color either, but that's because I usually have my curtains closed. I don't normally have, or in this room I have no windows at all, so no sunlight, nothing to turn these cases a funny color. Yeah, so I digress. We're talking about samples, and we were last time talking about Amiga Pal, which is an app I threw together, which is a front end for SOX, which is Sound Exchange. It calls itself the Swiss Army knife of audio, and it does almost everything you need. Not all of it's obvious, or that's one of the reasons I wrote the app. And even since the last stream, I've tweaked my recipe for the chain of how this conversion is done from WAV or MP3. Well, now it'll do WAV, MP3, FLAC, OGG, or AIF/AIFF. It'll take those in. I've tweaked a whole bunch of things so the mono mixdown works properly. I tweaked something this afternoon that makes something else work better than it did. Currently, the version that's online doesn't let you see what the output file size is going to be after you've converted it to Amiga to 8 SVX format, which is quite important because it's good to know whether your sample will be within the 64 kilobyte limit. Oh, thanks. The new Windows fixes work, Ace. Thank you. That's a relief. Wasn't working very well on Windows. I hadn't tested it in 2 years. But yeah, the 64 kilobyte limit for a sample instrument in Protracker is not a strict limit, but the format can support 128K. But the replayers, most of the replayers that were written since, including the replayer that came with Protracker 2.3D, I think, or Protracker 2, don't support 128 kilobyte samples, or maybe it's that they don't figure out the loop points. If the loop point is beyond 128K, there's some confusion there. Confusion on my part. There are people who understand this intimately. DJ Hoffman knows what's what, because it was Hoffman who patched the replayer and gave the code to 8-Bit Bubsy, who updated this version of Protracker and made the Windows and Mac clone. Anyway, it's good to know if you're going to be able to get the whole sample you convert or half of it, and that's back to that compromise of, do you lower the quality so that you can get more time in your sample. So what I didn't want to do tonight was be pointing at my computer screen again, looking at Amiga Pal. I've added some things, some really cool things, as well as the 8K low pass filter that is optional for after the process. So after you've done most of the conversion, you put it through this 8 kilobyte low pass to get some of the hiss gone. You don't always get that hiss, so you don't always want to do that. But I've also introduced separate high and low pass filters that come in earlier, which you can set yourself. So if you were watching the stream last time, we had I had an Amen loop, Amen drum loop that had a lot of bass material in it. The way it was sampled, it was taken directly from a vinyl. I think an old Jungle white label, and so I had a lot of bass. Melodic bass energy going on that really set the tune in a key that I didn't want it to be in. So, but the thing with an Amen loop is you're normally using that. You're not using Amen loops for their bass energy. Really, you're probably going to layer them on top of drums, on top of loops that have serious kicks in them. So, a lot of the time, what you want the Amen for is kind of mid to high, clattery nonsense and chops and stuff. So that reminded me that I should put this feature in Amiga Pal. So now you can do the high pass, bring it up to 100, 110. So you cut away that bass, which you don't need, and then do your conversion. Some other features as well. Anyway, today I prepared a load of samples, a load of pads, synth pads. Spent a bit of time in Ableton making single notes. Hi there, the chopstab. Chords, single notes, usually a high and a low, octave spaced apart of each note, because we'll use those. We'll use those tonight. We'll see how we can make new pads or use those more fluidly. The point is always to avoid having to sample a whole phrase of music, because that's wasteful. It's a real waste of space. It's much cheaper to have one note that you can do different things with. That's what most of the stuff's about. The other thing, I did some Rode keyboard electric piano licks and a few variations, and I'll show you some of those variations and why I did them like that and how we'll use them. And we'll try and get into actually making music happen quicker than we did last time. 15 minutes in, it's a good time to start actually looking at Protracker and doing some stuff. So I'm going to clear everything here. Go to, oh, I can't see that because my gaffer tape's melted again. This is not good. This is not professional. There we go. Sort of see that. Are the levels okay, by the way? Hopefully they are. Yeah, I clicked on clear, this button here, which gives you the option of clearing the song or the samples or all. Song clears every bit of data that's not a sample. Samples clears every sample but no other data. And there are reasons to use that which don't apply to us now. All kills a lot. Start again. That's cool. That's how you get a new blank document, essentially. And yeah, so again, like last time, I made a lot of compromises. I wanted to get some of these samples as high quality as possible, but I also wanted enough length that would still fit in the, let's say, 63, 64 kilobyte limit that I've got on Protracker. So I'm going to do Alt-S on the keyboard. Where's the keyboard gone? Oh, is this weird chat box blocking half the screen again? Sorry. I'll try and make that better. That's not getting better, is it? I've got an idea. I'll put that, excuse me. Can I move that down? That's not what I wanted to do at all. I want to move that to top. There we go. Where's that stupid browser thing? Move that up. There we go. Now people can see some chat, but all of the screen. That's what we want. Yeah. What was I talking about? Doesn't matter. Sure, it doesn't matter. Yeah, 64 kilobyte. Oh, I was telling you what I was doing. I was going Alt-S on the keyboard. Little finger is normally near Alt. My little finger is do what you like with your fingers. Alt is used a lot for navigating around the Protracker screen. Alt S for sample, toggle that on and off. Alt D for doskpop, which is where you do your loading, saving, and ruining things because you clicked the wrong thing, and I'll try and cover that as best I can so you can avoid that. Alt E is where you get your extended editing screens. Keep tapping that to go through screen 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There are 4 screens, remember, one of them's hidden, and it's the chord screen, and you get to it by clicking chord in here, and then you have to click E to get out of it. Yep. Intuitive. That. Any other important windows that you would want to access? There are other ones you can get to with the Alt key that I don't habitually need. The pattern list and stuff like that. I'm not doing that right now. That's okay. And I'll go into sample, which always loads in the bottom half over the data, the pattern display, and doskpop to load the doskpop in the top. Now, I've transferred a load of stuff over, and I did that on compact flash card from my Mac, do it from a PC as well. Pretty straightforward using, I've shown you this before, I'll show you again, the compact flash to PCMCIA adapter. They're a couple of quid online. This is a very old one, but it works. It's just a pin-to-pin connection between compact flash and the pins in the Amiga that read PCMCIA. It's just plastic and a bit of metal. This is an 8 megabyte Nikon camera card, which is more than enough for transferring hundreds of samples. The kind of sizes that we're looking at here. Mono 8-bit, anywhere between 10K and 30K kilohertz. So that's how I got these on earlier. I won't bore you with that again, but I will do a session just on, as well as conversion, on transfer and stuff like that. That's the kind of thing, if you have a physical Amiga, you might well already know how to do that, but there's some stumbling blocks we'll cover. Right now, we're looking at the samples that I got earlier. And the first thing I'm going to do is click on this bit at the top. I've got a choice: load module, load song, load sample, save module, save. So these rows are what you have to look at carefully, because you might go in here and think you're loading a sample. Actually, you click on one and it loads a module into the sample slot and overwrites everything. Anyway, we're going to click load sample. Now, this hasn't updated yet. Don't be fooled. This here, the path, has shifted to what our default path is for samples. Now, if I go back out of here and have a look in setup, we've got a whole lot of options. These options are configurable in here or via ptconfig, which is a tool that I made and put on my website, which lets you generate a Protracker config file, which can be a bit easier than doing it all in here. Definitely makes saving color schemes more easier. I've got a little gallery of color schemes that you can try out if you want to pimp your Protracker. Yeah, so you can load and save the config, but it will always just read config 00, and I'll tell you another time where that lives and what it does, that file. But the things we're interested in looking at now are the paths, if I can find them. There they are. So these are the default paths that it will look in for the types of files that you want. Mods, songs, samples, PT, dia. We don't care about songs really. It's not really a thing that we deal with these days, or yeah, we'll ignore that for now. Mods and samples is what we're interested in. DH1 is my hard disk partition. DH0 would be where the workbench is installed. That's the operating system. I don't store much on there. DH1 is where all files, images, mods, samples live. D drive, if you like. So I've got a samples directory on there. I don't think that's actually what I use, but PT directory, it wants to know where Protracker lives. The executable can't tell where it itself is, I think. So it wants to know that. It helps it find certain config files. Mine's in SRC because I assemble this from 8-bit Bubsby's source once I've hacked in my logo because I'm vain. And that's where you do that. But when we thought that we'd switched to sample loading, we actually hadn't updated the can't find directory. Maybe this directory isn't even on this machine. Let's go back and manually with the return key or the enter key, press it to force it to read that directory. That's the gist of this. Force it to do things because nothing in directory op can be taken for granted. And I can never quite remember how it's going to behave. And it's different in every version. Slightly different in some of the versions I used to use. So to be safe, then we've gone to load sample, and we've explicitly gone to the partition, the path that we want, DH1. Samples is where I put a bunch of samples earlier, and I converted a bunch of these. Oh, we looked at those last time, didn't we? The Blue Martin samples. I'm sure I added more samples than this. Why did I put them though? That's the question. Parent to go up a level. I might have stuck them in mod work and in here. Maybe I never copied them over. That's possible. I'll get them in a minute. That doesn't matter. We're going to load up some drum samples because, yeah. So. Pretty straightforward. Lots of drum samples here. I've sampled these at a lower rate than some of the pads. I wanted the pads to be crystal clear. And I'll show you how that pans out. So here's a pad, one of the Blue Martin pads that those guys nicked from somewhere else, I'm not sure where. So the note that I sampled in Amiga Pal, I said I wanted it to be, I think I said A3, which is not quite the highest, but it's almost the highest note on the Protracker scale. And that's about the pitch that that you get in listening to it as a WAV at 44.1 or 48K. Maybe that, yeah, that. So it's pretty good. It sounds pretty amazing. There's not much noise on there. There's a bit of hiss on the high end, but because the pad itself has a lot of high end energy in, it disappears into the mix. So it's been bounced to mono from stereo. I think I do about 60 or 70% power mix to mono. Normalize it first in the nuts and bolts in the background of Amiga Pal. Sox is doing this. Normalize it, and then the low pass and the high pass filters, if you've got them, then maybe it's the remix after that. That's what they call the mono mixdown command. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll talk about that another time. It's done. Sounds pretty good. So I'm using control and left and right arrows to switch between samples. There are other ways to do it. Ooh. Sorry, I hope that's not me. The kids are asleep, so it's not them rinsing Netflix on the iPads. I've got a green light in OBS. Don't know what that means. Let me know how that goes. Yeah, I'm using control, which is here. You might not be able to see on that camera. Slightly different place to on every other computer. Control is here next to caps lock. It's another little finger one, little finger for control, shift and alt. And control and arrow keys switch sample number. You can also do that with the mouse by going up here and clicking on sample 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to 31. But it's in hex, so it's 1F. Learn hex. That's handy. I'm going to go to the second sample position. And I'm going to go back to these drums that I converted. So now I'm hitting a much lower note. If I go back to that one and hit C3, that's clearly really down pitched from, hi Andy, from there. And I sampled these drums in Amiga PAL. I converted them in Amiga PAL at C3 because I don't mind a bit of noise so much here. If it was any worse than that, I could do the old filter and then boost trick to try and kind of get rid of some of the more egregious bits of noise and then add a bit of snap back into the drums, but didn't need to. That seems fine to me. So the pitch at which these came in, to get the pitch as heard originally when these samples were created or these records were cut, it played different notes on the Protracker keyboard, and I'm going to use our speed commands again to get a BPM that seems sensible for, maybe we'll go a bit slower and lighter this time. 128, bollocks to it, let's do 160 BPM. And let's loop this around, see what happens. So that's not going fast enough to give that a clean loop. That's quite a fast break. Let's go. So we'll lower the pitch of this. So we're going at 170 BPM, which is a nice, healthy drum and bass tempo. And we did this by, it doesn't really matter so much what the speed is. It matters in a big way, but not for the BPM. That 170 BPM was achieved by doing this F command here. FAA. And AA is in hex. So up to, I think, 20, somebody will correct me. It interprets the F command as a speed command. That's the rate at which the ticks are calculated for the how fast the data is processed. But that isn't necessarily the same as BPM. BPM goes from 20 to 255, which is FF. There we go, 255 tempo, 255 BPM. So A is a lot less than that, a bit less than that. That's where we're at. That's all we need to know about that. So the quick way to find out how your drum loop is going to fit into your chosen BPM and your pattern is to just fire in a note there. There we go, and then run it. So that sample's quite a long sample. It doesn't need to be this long. I could save space in the module by cutting it in half, because that sounds like a duplicate loop entirely. I don't think there's any difference in the second time. Yeah, so on principle, I know it doesn't need to be that long, so I'm going to chop half of it out. I've got a little click at the end there. I'm going to select it and drag it like you would in proper music software. And I'm going to do show range. That's the offending bit. I'm going to take it from a 0 crossing point. That's where it crosses the midpoint. That'll be absolute silence for a few microseconds. Slide that to the end, cut it out, and now it should end without any clicks. There we go. And what we should do now is loop it. Click loop off to on. There we go. Now can you see everything on that screen? There's a few. That's a bit better. Okay. Hey, syntax terror. Evening. Andy's dropped Dairy Lee on his trackpad. I think we should all have a moment's silence for both the Dairy Lee and the trackpad. And for Andy. Okay. So that'll loop forever now. And it's a good way of finding out how close the pitch is to where it needs to be. Because as you'll have gathered by now, there's no fancy time stretching or on the fly resampling or anything going on in Protracker. Protracker doesn't know what it knows what it thinks a note is, but that isn't what you think that note is. All it cares about is the rate at which you tell it to play a sample. It doesn't care what that sample thinks its own rate is. And you know, it loads raw format, which doesn't have any kind of headers that explain that. So it's not all abstracted into something like 44.1 or 22 or 50. It's just a big buffer full of samples, and then you say what rate you want those to be played. So if you think the sample rate should be about 31, then the note you need to tell Protracker to play to get it to play at that speed is one of those very high notes, A3, B3. So that means that if we go down in the notes, then the pitch of the instrument gets lower, because this is done really in a really basic way. That also, of course, means that the time it takes to play that increases, just like on a tape, slowing down a tape, that kind of thing, reverse chipmunks. So what we've got here is the loop is starting again a few lines before it should. So we need to lower the pitch to start getting it right. Lowering the pitch makes it go more slowly. We'll try that. A sharp 2, B flat, but yeah. So we've got one extra beat. That extra kick drum at the end means that that's still too high pitched for this BPM. But this is starting to get away from feeling like a 170 BPM tune. So let's look at the speed. I think the speed needs to be FO4. And this needs to be high. We'll put another note in halfway through and see where that happens on the loop point. It's going to be much higher. I can't remember how ridiculously fast these drum moves were to begin with. Not that fast, so this is getting a bit silly. So sometimes when I'm doing this, I need to get my mind right, and a good way to do that is to go back to the sample, Alt-S to the sample editor, make sure we're on the sample that we want to be on, and I'm just gonna cut the kick drum out, copy it. In fact, I'm going to select it and then copy it. Don't know why the cursor's gone blue, don't like the look of that. I'm going to click beg. Every time you want to paste a sample, beg or end get you the very beginning or the end of the area. Otherwise, it'll paste where you click, which position you click, but it's really hard to click the exact end position. It's a pixel hunt. If you get it wrong, it's not great. So beg, paste, happens every time to me. I keep forgetting. A new sample, the volume is 0. Up here, go up to here and right click the mouse button and then click 1, 2, 3, 4 times to go up in increments of 10 to give it maximum volume, which you can tweak later if you need to. Yeah, Keto, I know you're matching sample rate, pitch, and Protracker BPM for the whole loop, but I guess if you chop up the loop into its components or use offset commands, you could have more versatility to match it to more Protracker speeds. Absolutely right. We're going to chop the hell out of this sample, and we're going to go nuts on the 9 command, which is the offset commands, and yeah, we'll get to that. You got this. No, you're absolutely right. We're getting there. I'm just taking my time and rambling. So there we go, as a kick. All right, I'm just going to hammer this in here and make a really straightforward kick pattern to get in my head the 170 that I think we're at and make sure that the speed's right. I've done so many tunes like this, and I always have to go back and connect it to reality and make sure that the speed is doing what I think it's doing relative to the BPM. So back on the keyboard here, remember last time we talked about, or the time before, we talked about something that it has a different name in almost every tracker. Some people call it note skip, some people call it edit skip, some people call it note add, edit add, note jump. I've heard other ones. There's some trackers where it doesn't have a name, and when you try and talk to the developer about what you want changed, they don't understand. One of the main reasons I made my own version of Protracker by going in and hacking the code, not very well because I'm terrible at assembly, but the thing I wanted to do for my own quality of life was to change the default note add to 0. Note add is when I'll set it to 1. Every time you put a note in, it jumps down to the next thing. I don't like that usually. Can be handy, especially if you use it in conjunction with something like caps lock on the Amiga, which in Protracker gives you that, which isn't on by default. That's keyboard repeat. We're used to that on most modern computers. Amiga has it in the OS, but it's been implemented in a custom way in Protracker because everything is. This doesn't use much of the operating system, it just bangs the metal, bangs the hardware. Delete all of those. Back to the top. So I'm going to set note skip to 8. So that's Control 8. That means every time I put a note in, it'll jump down 8 lines. That's a really good way to put drums in because I forgot what. That doesn't matter what pitch I was putting them in at. Press spacebar to get us into edit mode. We know we're in edit mode because the cursor turns blue, and then we just hammer a key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. So that's done 8 kicks spaced 8 lines apart in our 64 line pattern. And if I do the same thing again on the in between 2 of those, then we get every 4 lines. It's not every 4 lines, so I messed it up. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Always remember to set that back with Control 0. That's back to the way I like it, or Control 1 if that's the way you like it. I'm zipping around the pattern quite quickly with the F keys here. F6, F7, F8, and F9. F10 you can program to be a custom position that you always want to get back to. I kind of work a bit too fast for that. But to jump to the middle is often handy, especially if you want to double a loop. You mark a block, copy it, F8 to jump to the middle, go back again. I wanted to delete that. I want to replace it with something else. So I can pitch it here. Until they sync up, but clearly I'm not at a very sensible speed for doing this. I'm going to mute that second channel because it's not helping right now. Am I making a total hames of this? I don't want it to run that fast. I don't really need it to run that fast because I'm not doing anything really intricate that needs that level of resolution. So I'll run this a bit higher. A second note in there. Yeah, okay, that'll do. So a bit of trial and error there has got us almost to the pitch we want that makes sense for the BPM this was originally, which I think was about 170. At this point, I'm going to go into this channel and I'm going to delete this stuff I've made. I'm going to edit mode again, spacebar, cursor turns blue. Control K deletes everything else in the channel, but make sure you don't delete something you want to keep, like the speed command up here. So I'll go up and I'll use the delete key to get rid of that separately. So you hear that little double trigger of the kick there. That's because the loop is kicking in on halfway through, maybe 1 or 2 ticks through line 15. Tick is like a sub-line. It relates to the time in sync of the Amiga, which in Protracker is either V blank or CIA. I can't remember what CIA stands for, but V blank is the rate at which the screen is updated with, the CRT screen would be updated with lines of pixels in the olden days. So 15k, 15 kilohertz, 15 times a second. No, 15 hertz, sorry, not kilohertz. So now I think an entire semitone would be too much to adjust this pitch by. So if I go and move that, do that slightly faster. Well, that was the wrong way to go anyway, because we need to go down, because we need to lower the speed of this to stop that retrigger happening and to get it in sync. But I think down to B is too low as well. Let's find out. Actually, it sounds almost perfect. But the new one cuts in a little bit quick. I'm going to go through and fill the rest of these with Bs, filled with Bs, and then I'm going to use fine tune to pitch it up a little bit. Remember, pitching up will speed up the sample playback. Let's go up +3 on fine tune. I think that's almost perfect. +5 gives it a bit more space to breathe. Also, the loop point might not be completely accurate, so doesn't really matter. You're just going to have a bit of shuffle and swing. This is not going to be completely robotic, nor should it be. That's a bit too much. There we go. So this is all making sense now. F5 speed and 170 BPM. And we'll come back to those drums very, very soon. But we'll get rid of this. We don't need it. Ooh. Excuse me. It's a noise I make when that happens. I'm going to kill that. And in edit, which I did Alt-E to get to, cycle through the edit windows until I see kill. That just kills the one sample, not the same as clear. Kill the current sample, question mark, are you sure? Now, anytime you see a modal, a pop-up box, a dialog box in Protracker that says, are you sure? Yes, no. Bear in mind that most of the time, if you click no, it'll happen anyway. So you got to be sure before you click that. This is just a D&D trap, basically. Yeah. Yeah, speed shuffle. I'm gonna go the whole. Keto says throwing in a varying speed shuffle per line or alternate line can give some useful and interesting timings too. I'm gonna go the whole hog on that and do a funk chip dedicated session where we talk almost exclusively about funk tempos and funk timing, and that's what I call it. That's what most people in the demo scene would call it, and I don't think there's a better name for it than that because it works for funk really nicely. I won't digress too much into the funk groove. We could run a funk groove in this, and it wouldn't change the nature of those drums because they would only be syncing back on a line that made sense. So we could run other stuff that was syncopated if it was sitting alongside those speed changes. And we could do it without affecting the drums, which would be quite interesting and is a technique in its own. But right now I'm gonna, what did I say I was gonna do? I said I was gonna get more samples in. I was gonna get a pad in. Actually, no, before I get a pad in, because it's good to lay out your samples in a kind of sensible way. I mean, it always gets messy by the end, but it's good to start at least with laying them out sensibly. So before I get a pad sample in, I'm going to cut up this drum loop. We know how it sounds. God almighty, do we know how it sounds. I'm going to range the whole thing, range all, select the whole thing, just to be better than doing it by hand, because you can be absolutely sure that you've got every every sample. Copy, Command right to move to a new instrument slot. Oh, we've already got a pad. I forgot about that. Anyway, beg. Remember, put the pointer position to the beginning with beg and paste, and we've got an exact duplicate. But it doesn't make any sound until we up the volume here to max, and then we'll start chopping the bits off it. Leaving every time we chop, cut, dump it somewhere else, we've left a standalone drum. We could zoom in here and make sure we get the crossing point we want and stuff, but I don't care. You can do it by sight on a sample this size. Now there is, or there used to be, or there isn't. That's a lot of options. I'm sure there's a way of playing the sample from the position. So you can play the whole waveform like that, or you can do play display, which is just what you can see, or you can play the range. Sometimes you want to be able to play from a position and then hear a loop without having anything selected, and I'm sure there used to be a way of doing that, but I can't remember what. Anyway, for now, just play range is quite handy. It lets us know if we've got the start spot on. More to the point, it lets us know if we're missing any important bit of that snare. So I'll cut that. Command right arrow, sorry, Control right arrow, volume up again, paste it at the beginning. That's weird. It's copied the entire waveform. This is concerning. Maybe it's my fault. I'm sure it's my fault. Weird. Anyway, the next one I'm going to cut. I think I won't take these little hi-hat chops here. If you're really going all in, you want to cut everything, but sometimes it's nice to keep the shuffle that they had originally. And there's normally good shuffle on some of these old breaks. If you can retain that, it's good, so I'm going to retain it. And I'm going to cut from here. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave a gap in the instruments. I'm going to go all the way up to 6, sample 6, paste at the beginning. It's done it again. I think I know why this is. There's an obscure, everything's obscure in this, but there's an obscure setup option. I think cut to buffer isn't working the way it should, and I don't think it's my fault on this rare occasion. Anyway, so I want that separately. Yeah, that worked. Okay. I think we're back in business. I think that's a weird option that's not being implemented properly. So we don't need most of that. Where do we get up to? That's weird. Anyway, doesn't matter. Well, hey, we've got those already. So that's surplus to requirement. Most of these breaks, wherever you get them from, have at some point in their lives been chopped together from other breaks, which have been chopped together from other breaks, which have been at some point put together from vinyl of somebody playing it much more slowly. And typically you'll find that there's not enough variation in the hits themselves to justify keeping, there's no variation here at all. These are the same hits. So I'm going to kill that sample because we don't need it. Alt-E to go back to the edit when you could just cut it, but then you've got stuff hanging around in your buffer, or not, as the case may be, or more than you thought, as we just discovered. But it's good to go for a clean kill and get a new one started. Let's go back to these. We've got, that's all we need, because we're going to recreate this. Find that kick. If I muted that channel, yeah, I muted that. Muting is really handy when you're composing. Alt with the little finger down here, or whatever finger you like, or your nose, or whatever. Alt ZXCV. They're the 4 channels. You've got 4 channels, easy to remember, easy to map to a keyboard. Toggles, so bringing something in and out while you're composing another track is handy. So we're going to recreate this before we start chopping it. This is how I do it. I don't know if everybody does it like this. I don't know if people like to chop and then just see what happens. I like to try and recreate the flow almost exactly of the original break before I start chopping it up. So I've got a framework to work within. So they're phasing a bit because they're hitting exactly the same time. And then in theory, the snare hit should be dropping about here, right in the middle. Nope. So that's the middle because it's we're doing the pattern data more slowly than we were. So I'm just going to mute the original, stitch it together myself. Ah, that's why I need to. So that's a little bit tighter. It's not rolling quite the same way. It's a bit more two-steppy. We could fill that out again if we wanted to. So we could go back to a sample where a sound is that we want. We might not want to waste an entire sample slot. Remember, we've only got 31. We might not want to waste a sample slot on just this. Or this. Often I would actually, because it's a really handy thing to have. What did the original sound like? Yeah, so I probably should have cut that. But hey, it doesn't matter because I'm going to use a sample offset to trigger this halfway through. Save me cutting it up and using up another sample slot. So I'm going to click where I want that, where I want to hear it. I'm going to select the whole thing, range. Yep, that is the fragment that I want. And this is easier. What I'm about to do now is easier in the Mac and PC clone of Protracker 2.3D. But here on the Amiga, we can go to the sample editor, and pause and have a look at where it is on here. And if we take that number 998, that's the number of bytes at which this, there I can click to a byte number in this sample. This sample is 12F6 in hex long. My hex isn't that good, but it's some. Now, can I get that to display in binary? Surely I can. I would like to see that in binary, please. Show decimal is on. No, that's just for the. It doesn't let you see that in decimal. It's just for some other things it shows you in decimal. But hey, decimal's a waste of space. Literally a waste of space. That's the byte we want. 09B8. We're going to strip out the two characters here, the B and the 8. We don't need those. 9 is what we want to use for the 9 command, coincidentally. The 9 command is the offset trigger command. 900 triggers that sample at the start of the sample, at 0 byte. 99 should be exactly where we want this. Huh? It's 909 though, isn't it? There we go. There we go. So now we've got the loop almost identical. I am doing something different at the end, but it doesn't matter because I like mine. So that fragment I've got there on line 9, on channel 2, on track 2. That fragment is kind of dug out of an existing sample with this 900 command, this 9 offset. It's really handy. It's kind of limited. The rate, the sample rate and the size of your sample would dictate where that midpoint falls, because it's a byte offset for the maximum that Protracker is able to play. It's not making any sense, but hey, that's roughly the middle. But if you want to get it spot on, then you can do what I did just there and go to edit up and find out exactly where the position is. The reason I got rid of these two characters here, the 8 and the A, or whatever those, we just haven't, the effect doesn't give us that kind of resolution, but it's close enough for a sample of this size. If you had a much longer sample, then you might not get the resolution you wanted. You might have to compromise on exactly where your offset hit. But it's more than good enough for a short drum sample like that. So we've got a copy of that. Hey, we can ditch this nonsense now. We don't need any of your... that's just cheating, using an entire loop. It's not fun. All right. I like having that in here just to work with. So what I did there was Control B to open mark block. If you see, the number increases as I tap down, but that's way too slow. So instead of doing that, tap up once to loop around at the bottom. Now we've marked the entire pattern 0 to 63. Control C to copy it. I did a Shift Tab to move back to track 1. Another down to loop me back to the top. And now it's a Control P to paste it, not Control V. Control V does something different, ruins all your samples. Well, it filters all your samples, but normally that's absolutely not what you want. I do see you tuned in just in time for your favorite command. Oh yeah, Dairy Girls. Yeah, sorry for clashing with Dairy Girls. I'm going to be watching Dairy Girls as soon as I'm finished. Yeah, it's on 4, isn't it? Is it on 4 with the terrible, terrible 4OD? Ugh, I should have planned this better. Anyway, I'm going to Control P, and I just pasted over my speed command that was so torturously acquired, and I'm going to delete all the notes from here. You can do a cut and paste. I tend not to like to do a cut and paste if I can avoid it, just in case something goes wrong. It's just an old habit. Speaking of old habits, I should be saving this as I go, because we've seen what happens there. I'm going to switch back to the disk up, and I'm going to switch to load module up here. Again, we're taking nothing for granted. We're going to go down to mod work here, force it to read that directory. Go in here, and we're going to call it what are we going to call it? Splat.mod and save module. Are you sure? Yep. And yeah, that has worked. I'm just got these channels muted. Whew. There we go. So now we've got essentially what we had before, except we're going to loop that. We're going to mark that block up to 15. That's the first 16 lines. Remember, we start at 0 because this was written by programmers. And 0 is where you should start counting, of course. Like, I don't consider myself a proper programmer, but that is one thing I adhere to. And then we can use that command again, the F commands, to jump down to line 16. Put it in edit mode, Control P, paste that again, paste it again, and paste it again, because when you paste, you'll get dropped to the end of the block you pasted. So 4 quick pastes will fill the pattern out. What we've got now, though, is the speed pattern repeated 4 times. That's a waste of space. You shouldn't have. You should really only need, if your module stays the same BPM and tempo and speed, multiply it all the way through, you should only declare that once near the start or at the start. There are other reasons not to fill your track with it or leave them lying around. If I made some software called Chip Disco 10 years ago, which is a DJ, dual deck DJ program for modules, and does beat matching and all sorts of, and pitch shifting and all sorts of things. But what really killed it was rogue speed commands that threw everything out of whack halfway through a module where you weren't expecting them. So it's good practice to get rid of those if you've just quadruplicated them like I have. So I'm just going to go through and edit mode, zeros to delete effects. There is a way of deleting effects commands, but in all these years I never learned it. So I'm just looking at something. I think I did try and learn it and I wrote it down, but I can't find it. Never mind. Oh, Alt delete, apparently. never done this, so I was just hammering away at the keyboard quite happily, but let's try it. No, it didn't work. God, I'm not sure what happened there. Well, I deleted a row instead of a command, so that's a lie. That's from the one of the Protracker docs, and it's a lie, so let's forget about that. It's a bit dull. Let's have a pad. That loops pretty nicely. Calm down, Andy. Sorry, false alarm. It doesn't seem to work at all. I'm going to try it again, actually. I'm going to put a spurious command over here. I'm going to put C42 here, and I'm going to try that. I said it was Alt-Delete. Oh, it worked. It did work there. Let's say we've got a note and a command on there, and we wanted to delete just the command. Oh, it's because I wasn't in edit mode. There we go. Hey, we've all learned a new thing today. Wow. Right. That's really handy to know. That would save a lot of time, especially if you had, sorry for guinea pigging here, but I'm going to try this. Let's say we've got a bunch of commands and we want to get rid of them quickly, but we've got notes over here that we don't want to. We could go Control 1 for the edit skip. We've got the caps lock on for the note repeat, and let's see if Alt Delete. Oh, edit mode. That's just not working. All right, that's not entirely helpful. Okay, that only works when you're on a note command. Presumably, the developer thought that, well, if you couldn't be asked to just type a few zeros, then okay, fair enough. So you could do it here like this. Yeah, okay. So with key repeat and note skip, edit skip, and alt delete, you can go down a list of notes and kill all the commands. That's really handy to know. I wish I'd known that 25 plus years ago. Okay, I think I just broke a genuine tip on here. I'd be curious to know if anybody else knew about that. I'm sure lots of people did, but maybe if anybody else on this channel knew, that would be interested. Kill that. Unmute those channels and hear it again. I remember what we tried to do last time with the really noisy, not the last time, the time before, when we were doing study beats. We tried to do a bit of sidechain compression, but it was really hard to tell what was going on over the noise. Now I know at a glance where my kick drum's hitting. So on the left, on track 1, it's always hitting when there's a 3, sample 3 instrument there. So I could do, I would never do this in one of these, in this style. Oh, no, Dad. I would never do this in a jungle or a drum and bass track, but just for the crack, I'm going to do it. So I think last time what I did was no, what was it? It was that's pretty extreme, actually. I'll do it with an 8. So 8 and then 2 A's, okay. So the A0 something command is volume slide down. A something 0 command is volume slide up. So it's quite a low resolution one, which means it does what it does very fast. Doesn't give you much fine control. There's a different command that does give you fine control. We'll look at that another time. But we're just going to try and pump the volume on that a bit, just for fun. There's another there's another 3. There are easier ways of doing this, but I usually like doing them by hand. I never learned the shortcut for just copying a command. That's quite obnoxious, actually, as pumping sidechain goes. But that's something we'll come back to right at the very end if you want to maximize the hell out of your Amiga Protracker drum and bass or anything track. Then that's one way of doing it. Perceptually maximizing the level of those kicks, which on the Amiga aren't carrying a tremendous amount of sub-bass energy anyway. So however you can give the impression that it's been boosted, this might be good. On the other hand, you might find that it's a bit of a waste of pattern data that you could be using for other commands. I quite like it. I'm just gonna duplicate it through this track. Let's take it from there, actually. So those values can be tweaked to make that a little less, or even a little more obnoxious, but I'm not going to make it any more obnoxious. So yeah, this drum pattern's really boring. That's a problem with that. But before I fix that, I'm going to find a bass, and I think I've only got some fairly noisy basses. I'm going to click load sample. We don't want to accidentally load a mod. In fact, I'm going to save the mod, I hope. Yep. I'm going to load sample. I'm going to reread this drum funk. Well, I've got a lot of nasty basses in here. I'll put the sample volume up first so we can hear them. Almost forget to do that. It's possible that some of these basses aren't entirely appropriate. Yeah, very nasty. These are from Rhythm Lab, I think. I think it's a free sample pack from Russia. I used that in a tune last night, actually. Yeah, don't forget, the Amiga can play noises like this. If you put noises like this into it, you lose a fair bit. You lose a fair bit of sub, and you gain a fair bit of high noise. But hey, you can still shake a room, shake a sound system with it. Anyway, they're all pretty much not helpful for what I had in mind, so I'm going to go back to... now, did I make a bunch of bass samples today? I can't remember. If I did, I haven't copied them over, so we'll come back to that. But I might be more subby than I want for this. It's a bit more garage than I want to do right now. That wasn't a clever pitch for... so I batch converted these in Amiga Pal, and I should have taken a bit more care to make sure that the basses would be at a pitch that was useful to me. Sadly, there's no sample drawing in here. But there is in Protracker 2.3D. Keto just suggested I draw myself a sub-bass sample in the sample editor, which I could do by chopping up some binary and looping it and stuff. But the I could probably type out a sign if you did a lookup table of the right ASCII characters to go in a text file. The modern Protracker 2.3D clone on Windows and Mac by 8-Bit Bubsy has sample drawing in waveform drawing in the editor, which is really handy. The point of 2.3e wasn't to bring it up to date. So weirdly, 2.3D on modern machines is more advanced than 2.3e on the Amiga, but the point of that was to tidy up and fix bugs that have been in 2.3e for 25 years, which he has. So what did I get? I got this. Now I'm going to do something I don't often do, because I normally try to prepare a bit better than this. I'm going to downsample it. No, I'm going to upsample it. Are you sure? Yes. There we go. So now I'm going to filter some of that hiss out. Hopefully not lose too much of the snap. At the top of that envelope from wherever this came from. Do you know what? Before I do that, I'll come back to that because I think I might have a bunch of special up-rough samples on here. Or if they're not on here, then they might be on one of these compact flashcards from the past. Let's stick that in. Let's CFO is the mount location for a compact flash card. Uprough drum kits, there we go. I might find a nice 808 kick in here that I can use as a bass. Or something similar. Let's see what we've got. None of the decays on these are long enough for me to use like that, but they're really nice kits. That's got too much of a fade. I can't get that to loop quite the way I'd like it to. You should always have 808 kicks just sitting there nearby, because you never know. Never know when you need one. What the hell was that? Anyway, never mind that. I'm gonna kill that. It's alright, we've got a bass here. That's all I want from it. Right here. Now, fade up and fade down are handy things. They live in panel 3 of the sample editor. Excuse me. But if you select a region and then run one of those, it will either do nothing or it'll do the entire sample, neither of which is probably what you want. So what you need to do is remember that if it's a fade up, then it will fade up to the single position that you have, not a selection. Don't do a selection. Select nothing by just clicking a point without dragging, and then do the fade up or the fade down. The fade down will occur after the sample byte position. So if I want to fade that smoothly, I'll click there roughly. I'll do a fade down and it'll just tail that out to nothing pretty nicely. Now I'm going to do that filter. This may or may not work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to range all, and I'm going to copy, and I'm going to just keep that in the buffer, in the RAM, in my back pocket. And then I'm going to filter the whole lot. It's not helping much. At this point, we're just tweaking a couple of bytes here and there. And that's nothing useful back of that snap. So, so forget it. Swap buff. Put the original one back in. Swaps what's in the sample buffer with what's in the RAM buffer. I think it should do. That's what I expected to do. I hope that's what it did. Should mean that I get a crappy sample here. Yeah, very crappy sample there. That's a relief. Okay, kill that. We don't need it. And back to sample 6. And hey, we can do a lot of stuff with that. We can do the kind of sub bass pitching we want. It's not giving us a roller bass. It's giving us that kind of, yeah, the stuff that pitched 808 kicks with long releases, long decays were, and still are, used for in a lot of this type of stuff. Let's whack in a bass line. So there's enough complex high end in that pad that a lot of the noise on that sub, on that kick, is hidden. That we're using as a bass. I would often swap between that and a big fat roller synth bass. I would tend to syncopate these quite a lot. It's good for these to sit kind of adjacent to where the breakbeat hits are landing. pitching these right, sorry. Okay. I'll mark that entire block, just my laziness. I only want the first half of it, but I mark the entire thing, and then I jump with F8 to the middle of the pattern, because everything that gets pasted, drops off the end of the pattern, is gone. It doesn't go on to the next pattern. Protracker doesn't believe there is another pattern, because I haven't set that to be 1, and the length of the song is 1. So anything outside of that is just dragons and lava. Paste that in. Remember to go back and get rid of that speed command, just good housekeeping. I want to change the timing of that a bit at the end. No, it's not what I want. Change my mind. Cool. I'll do for now. And let's remember that we were in sample load save mode last time. We're going to switch it back to module. I want to make absolutely sure that we're where we think we are, and then we can do a save module, and it'll overwrite that. Should overwrite it. Hey, thank you, Any7. Andy has just sent me a raw 128 byte sine wave and hex. That's exactly what I need. I'm not gonna open it, because if I open a browser it might just kill this stream, but I'll stick a pin in that, and I should have prepared better. I'm sorry. Might be 256 bytes. Hey, what's a yeah, that's fine. That's cool. So what are we gonna do? Yeah, we're gonna try and do something nice with this these drums. Yeah. Let's mute everything else. So actually, the process of chopping up a breakbeat and recreating the flow and the shuffle of it as precisely as you can, which shouldn't be difficult if you've just chopped it at sensible points, just where the attack is beginning on the hit, then it actually sets you up quite well for really chopping around with it in a tracker. It's the way people work in renoise still. Go and watch some videos of Venetian Snare's renoise projects. That's absolutely crazy, but he was doing similar things to this way back in Octamed, and it's a great way of doing that without on machines that keep very good time, without having to send a lot of data back and forward to hardware, or do disk reads like conventional music software would have to do way back in the day. This is all really fast access stuff. It's all in RAM. So chopping this kind of stuff is nice and fast and easy, and I say easy, arcane commands and stuff, but hey, that's what we're here for. So let's leave the first phrase of that loop, the first go through. Let's double up on this, go using control and arrows to go back to sample 3, which is the kick. So I want a double kick there. But I want to, there'll be a lot of that, me going, because I know what I'm after in my head. And if I achieve it, you'll know, because you'll hear it. If not. So I'm going to go 909, yay, 909. So that's a tiny bit of variety there, has just kept that a little bit more interesting than it was. Sometimes I'll stick in a kick at a lower volume to really busy up the flow without taking away from the overall beat. I want that 909 again. No, it didn't quite work. Probably needs more space to breathe. Maybe I can just keep it at full volume. No, this is a horrible idea. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's do that. Oof, yeeks. Let's do it in semitones rather than full tones, and let's use the EC command, which is the first of the E commands that we're looking at because it's come up. So E is where a lot of Protracker commands are stuck. A lot of slightly more niche commands or fine-tuned commands that that usually relate to something that's going on in the main list from A to C. But they didn't need to have their own command, so they're kind of wrapped into E. Remembering them all is a bit tricky. Some of them are not useful. Some of them are very rarely useful. Some of them are like wave destructive. Like if you run them, it will filter all your samples. Like there's no coming back from that. It's absolutely crazy. There's Izar was good, and there's one of them that does a byte flip, which you can use to. It's such a niche use case. I've never heard one. Heard a module that uses this, but it does a byte flip on the samples in reverse so that you can essentially do a kind of filter pulse effect, but it acts on all the samples at once and all the tracks. What we need is the EC command. We might also use the ED command, and they are note cut and note delay. They work on the tick level rather than the line level. So a note delay in let's get this bass on the go. So E, D, A. It's not what I thought it would do. Am I getting confused with anyway, that is delaying by a couple of ticks, which you can think of for now, for convenience sake, as a subline time division. That's how many of those ticks it will delay the note by. That can be handy for reasons. Usually the reason is you want to put something else in the next slot and not have the note triggered there. So you want to trigger the note that you want to happen, the note that you want to hear in this slot. There is some reason why you need another command in there. So you trigger the line earlier, but you delay its hit with the ED command. That's harder to demonstrate than it is to just do. EC is a bit easier. That just cuts the command after a certain number of ticks. There we go. Conventionally, if you don't need it to be a really fast cut, then just the next line do a C00, which is a 0 volume. Stops the note. But you might want it to be even quicker than that. So don't think it'll have any effect at, or maybe it will at high values. No, I think it'll just do as many ticks as there are in the space between row 4 and 5, for instance. Anyway, what it means is that we can chop out the bits of those. I should have done the example on here. We've got these things. Remember, each one of these samples, sample 4, has 2 things going on in it. Has that extra hat roll at the end. So we want to cut these. Let's say 3 ticks and see how that sounds. That's quite a sharp cut. I'm going to open it up a bit more if I can. EC4. Cool. And down here, I might not be fast enough for what I want to do. I want to do a time stretch on this, basically. So I'm going to go back to the sample, which is this one. And I'm going to go back to the edit up and take a look at the position editor here. So if I do E01, E2, E3, E4, I might be able to stretch this a little bit. It's a long shot because I haven't really got the resolution that you need for stretching. Not quite what I like, but I'm not going to refactor the whole speed of this. But I'll show you an example of that effect working because it's cool. Let's save before we do anything else. And I'm going to increase the length and the position and the pattern. So the length is always one more than, it always appears to be one more than the number of patterns that you have. Actually, no, it doesn't. Your patterns start at 0. So 0 and 1 is a 2 pattern module. That means the length is 2. That is length 2. That's what you see. So sometimes it is as straightforward as it looks. I'm going to go to the next one, which is empty. And I'm going to run a pad here. And I'm going to put loads of those 9 offset commands. I'm going to do a control 1 first, get the note skip on the go. I'm going to do caps lock so that we've got a note repeat. I'm going to spacebar edit mode, and then I'm going to go. I'm not going to do that. That would be ridiculous because that's the wrong button. I'm going to do 9 all the way down. Right halfway, see where that gets us. Back up at the top. I'm going to have a look at this sample again with our sample editor open on panel 3. And, and we're going to have a click around here to see what we can see. Remember, we're getting rid of, now the 9 offset command is only going to work up to 1F, I think. That's position relative to, I'm confused now. It always confuses me. But anyway, FB should trigger the offset halfway through. It doesn't, because I've got the channel muted. No, don't. Why's that working? That's interesting. No, this might be, unless I'm doing something profoundly stupid, this might be a sample length bug. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to loop this and see if that has any effect on it. Right, that might be a bug. Well, since I try to do this effect on something so long, or on anything, I'm going to take a small. I'm just going to take that much of it, select it, copy it, find an empty sample slot, bump the volume up again to max, beginning position, paste. I'm going to take the start of it off, do a tiny fade up. Oh god, I always forget that. Fade up. Alright, that works. So yeah, I thought if your sample was too long, then you could only do the offset up to a certain point. Actually, it seems the offset won't work at all. I can never remember how that's going to go down. 8-bit Bubsy might have fixed that on 2.3D. Yeah, I think you're right, Andy. Andy says you might want it to be 48K or something about that to work. And I don't know if it's loaded more than 64K here. I presume it has. But anyway, that's cool, because if you've got a sample you want to do this effect on, then it can be much shorter than that, because as you'll see, we're going to basically do the Goldie time stretch effect. Used to be able to do it with Akai samplers way back. I'm not sure if it was something that was like built in, you pressed a button or you had to fiddle around, but this is how we do it in the Amiga. Remember, we've got a load of 9 commands that I just deleted. I'm going to put them back in. And I'm going to go, now, this is another thing that, another trick I learned, and I can't remember if it does it in hex or not. So I'm going to start with, copy previous command to current pause increment value, Alt plus equals. There we go. It's not quite as nice as the interpolate that you can get on Milky Tracker, but we need to trigger it every. Yeah, you get the idea. That's what we're doing. In a city, yeah. Yeah, it is satisfying. So this is a fairly lazy way to do it, to use that command to just repeat the last command you put in, but increment it slightly. I'm doing a lot of lazy things and saying I never usually do them. Usually it's because I'm just not in the habit from way back, because I never learned that command, so it's not in my muscle memory. But this one, if I do 2.5 and then I do that Alt equals, it'll just, oh shite the bed. Right. It's pretty cool. Because you can change speed and BPM at any time during the song, you could run this one a bit faster. And a lot of people do that. It actually doesn't sound too great because it's quite a dense pad. Works better with a single sample. In fact, let's demonstrate this by we can wipe over this sample because it's just a cut down. Let's get our the one we didn't have time to use last time. Yeah, there it is. Oh, why isn't that working? Is that too big as well? Cut that off. Might be too big. That even faster. So It's not compatible with the lazy way that I've just done things, but you could go in by hand and make these increments much bigger. Can you increment by... I mean, I'm talking about incrementing by hand, which takes a while, but Andy, if you know of a way of incrementing by 2 or 4 or other intervals, that would be very interesting. I kind of feel like I doubt Protracker is smart enough to do that. Yeah, what? Yeah, yes, it is not smart enough, or yeah, I think it does. Anyway, it's not. It's a cool thing to be able to do, but it's not what I wanted to do in this, this delicate and sensitive piece. We will do some chiptunes next time, don't worry. But there are a lot of principles here, especially sample editing, that it's easier to demonstrate with big complex samples like these. It's a bit trickier to keep a handle on, I think, if everything you see just looks like another slightly, almost identical wiggly line to the previous one. So it's a bit more to get your teeth into here, but all of these principles apply, especially in terms of the use of the tracker itself, to doing chiptunes. And I did one today while I was supposed to be preparing for this, because I can't help myself, so it won't be any struggle or hardship to fire up some chip tunes for the next session, I think. So let's get that sample. So right, I keep loading it up, but we really don't need the blood clot sample. So what else have I got? Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff on a compact flash drive that I had made earlier and converted with mixed results, because that need to be taken out and reinserted. I've heard people say you're not supposed to hot swap these compact flash cards. I've been doing it for years and it's been fine. I've got bigger problems coming up. I don't know if you see this power light flickering on the A1200. I think it's going to die. I swapped the power supply. It's not that. Well, it didn't make the difference. The power light's off now, so I'm guessing there's a capacitor fried somewhere. We'll see. It probably does need a recap. All the capacitors replaced on the board. I don't think any of them were leaking last time I looked. So here's a bunch of samples I made earlier. Most of them are named for the synth that I used in Ableton Live to put them together. Some of them are layers of other patches that I've made in the past in much higher quality, higher resolution. For a lot of them in high and low notes as well as chords. So here I've got mass. That must be a massive patch. Yeah, ch is a chord, high and low. That's got a lot of rogue low frequency energy on that. I should have used Amiga PAL to filter it out, because you can use Amiga PAL to filter that out, because we've got custom high and low pass filters with lovely little transparent blue and red overlays. Yeah, it's pretty chuffed with that. Completely pointless. So I think again, oh, actually, is a power LED meant to be off in Protracker unless you've changed the filter? And it's been flickering like mad anyway, just in case anybody's watching and thinking, like, oh, well, obviously it's not meant to be. I can't remember whether. I mean, that switches the filter on off the horrible filter. there's the filter on. I can see what they were trying to do. They were doing what I'm doing in Amiga Power, which is to put a low pass filter in there to try and keep some of the noise, the high-end noise, under control. But hey, that's why we're here. And the power light should indicate the status of the filter while Protracker is running, but it has been flickering, and before Protracker was running, it was flickering like mad as well. So I think it's hardware rather than software. I'm not just paranoid. Back to the doskpop, have a look at some of these patches. Some more chords here. So generally, if you have a sound that you know you're going to use in a module, whether it's a doskpop module or a house tune or a chiptune, you know, there are plenty of chiptunes with more complex synthesized samples in. That's fine. That's allowed. There are no rules here. You generally want to try to get, unless you're going for deliberately lo-fi as possible, you generally want to try and get a minimum of 2 octave-spaced samples of the same note, so that you can switch between them to give yourself more range than the Amiga keyboard will give you. So for all of these, I've done a high and a low. Which means that my range on a sample like this, for instance, is effectively there, all the way down to there. So it's kind of 4 octaves, I guess, where you'd get 3 normally. But it means that at the extreme ranges of those, you're not, it doesn't sound as drastically up-pitched or down-pitched as it would if you just had the one sample. If that makes sense. And I've got, if you record a pad, if you're going to record a big chord pad, get the notes as well. It never hurts to have them. I'll show you in a minute what we'll do with those notes, because often you change your mind about, you can't be asked to go back and resample them. That's Omnisphere with a bit of automation and some other stuff going on. So is that. That's the notes. And then I've got loads of nice road samples of just me playing a few phrases and chords in. Most of these are kind of broken chords. These would have been really handy when we did the Study Beats Lo-Fi Hip Hop week, because this is what we're crying out for, some of these at a decent level. But you could totally knock something together with those. But more flexible is to have a bunch of notes, and especially with something like a Rhodes. I've called them grace up and grace down, semi up and semi down, basically including a grace note that gets you to the note. You can't go very far up or down in pitch, and for these to still sound good, but you've got some leeway. Again, I should really have done, or maybe I did do 2 octaves for that. So that's a full tone, 2 keys on the piano keyboard, and I play that in. That's a full tone interval, and these ones are semitone. It's something you can record with a bit more feeling than you can necessarily get in the tracker itself, especially if your speed isn't high enough to give you that kind of resolution. And with something like a Rhodes, it's nice to, all you're ever going to do is occasionally give people the fake impression that they're hearing something real, because really these samples are going to chop in front of each other and stuff like that. Let me load up a few and see what I can do. I should have done them all in the same key, of course. So let's get a new pattern. Let's use this pattern that we started on before. No way to go up. Let's use a low. Should have sampled that even higher. Slide that note down with 3. 3 is the tone portamento command. 3 is quite a high speed slide. I should have got more than this. Let's cheat a bit by getting some of those chords in. Anyway, that's a sort of abortive attempt to show you how you can construct the suggestion of a real instrument from choice elements that you can prepare in advance. But what I came in here to talk about was not that, but using I'll leave them in for now. I've got enough spare. Let's get back to the sample editor and the disc up, and let's get one of these nice big notes in. They're really noisy, need to be filtered more. That's pretty good. Let's get that in here. Let's get that in there. So, great, we've got 2 big fat pads in there. Single note though, that's the key. I'm going to chop them quite severely. And I'm not going to worry too much about the loop points. I'm not even going to loop them yet. Hey Rory. And we've got a couple of options here if you want to mix this into a chord on the fly in Protracker that we didn't prepare earlier because we just had a flash of inspiration because we're artists and that's how we roll. I mean, yeah, you could run a bunch of them together in here. Drop the volume on each of them and you could run those out. But you can get quite a nice effect from the chord. So, sorry, your options. I was going to tell you your options. The option there would be to run them all here. That. I'm going to lower the volume on each one. I don't need that speed command there right now. And I'm going to go back and flick the loop points in. That didn't work. There we go. So again, hey, it's lazy day, so let's just go and do a crossfade on that. Can give you an instant loop, an instant perfect loop. Not always. Depends what kind of activity there is in the pad or the synth patch. Sometimes you might want to take a segment, copy it elsewhere, do the crossfade on that, and bring it back as a tail, as a looping tail. This is a pretty straightforward note that I've chopped the edges off already, which helps. And now I can just do a crossfade. What the crossfade does, that I wish it didn't, but somebody can tell me, it always lowers the volume to avoid clipping, but I think it lowers the volume a bit more than I'd like. I would rather mix them at a higher volume. So this is one way of turning that sample into on this big pad. Firstly, I'm going to take those volume commands out that I put in there, because the crossfade, which basically duplicates the sample, reverses one, mixes them both together. So in theory, and usually in practice, you should get a perfect or almost perfect loop. If you've used Ableton, it's what happens in Simpler or Sampler when you bring your loop in from the extremes of that sample, in a bit, and then bring those, I think it's called crossfade in Ableton. It brings those fade points in like that, which means that every time you get to the end, near the end of your loop in that crossfade area, it is already blending a fade in from the other side at equal power all the way to the top, so that it should sound like a seamless loop. That's kind of what's happening here, but in a clunkier kind of way. Let's say that's the one we want. As usual, before I do anything rash or anything at all, I'm gonna get this saved. Are you sure? Yep. Multitasking operating system. Hey, there we go. We're back at our desktop or our workbench. Because we've just saved, that data's on disk. Everything we've done up to there is on disk, because you know how saving works, because it's 2019. Multisamp is the one we want. I've shown you this quickly in the past. Load. We're going to go and find that module, which is called Drum Splat. Okay, open it up. There are only two patterns, and the pattern we want is pattern 1. We're going to start at start position 0, end position 31. Speed we know is 170. Doesn't really matter, it would just process the lines more slowly. And we haven't got any other commands doing anything else, it's just notes playing out. And also I don't think I can make it go to 170 exactly. Never mind, doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Let's get that on 5. And the pitch we want to sample at 2. We don't want to sample at a lower rate than we already have it, and I think it's in there as C3. Yeah, must be about C3, because it's not highest quality, I know that. I know I made a bit of a compromise for space and duration. Mix, working for a few seconds, hopefully. This is what crashed the Amiga 600 last time. Great, that was a few seconds because this has got an accelerator card in and it handles that kind of thing. Protracker can't use the accelerator card, can't use extra RAM, can't use any of that. It's all hitting the metal directly. It doesn't know that those things exist. Stuff like Multisamp does, and it can be a bit more grown up about this and say, okay, well, there's a 50 megahertz processor here sitting next to the 7 or the 14 one that you've got, so I'm going to use that instead with a lot of RAM. And we've got it, and it'll play it to us, and it'll let us save it somewhere. We're going to call it again, I've said it in the past, I'll say it again, .smp doesn't really mean anything, it's for my own reference. The Amiga doesn't care about suffixes, about file extension suffixes usually. Some programs might individually, but the system itself. It's not ingrained the way it is in macOS and Windows. I'm going to get that in the same directory. I'm not being too neat and tidy here. I'm going to stick that in there. I don't need that. Quit it and save some RAM. Use Amiga key and M to switch back, and multitask it. Yes, certain synths do always work better with X-Fade. Let's find that now that we've mixed it. This is only one of a few possibilities you have. This is a kind of offline mixing out of the box, where Protracker is the box, you know what I mean. Sample load, don't want that. I want how do I keep this stuff? I need to tidy up. This is many years of mess. We're in sample loading mode, that's good. Brand code is what we want to load in. Okay, there we go. That's bounced in place. Which is something that's still like a bit of a pain to do in some modern DAWs, like Ableton Live, which does a freeze, but doesn't. You got to duplicate the whole track and then freeze it, and then flatten, and then chop it up. Like it doesn't have just a consolidate render to WAV in place. Like Renize has rendered a sample, I think, and Pro Tools and Logic all have comp and render in place. Anyway. That's the Amiga's version of it. One version of it. That sounds alright. Let's crossfade the whole thing, lose a bit more of a valuable amplitude in the process. Bump it up, add some noise. I should have bumped up the volume before I did the crossfade. I'm stupid. There you go. That's. Hey, I could go back and do that again because it's just a sample I loaded in. Let's get as much volume as we can out of that before. Even clip it a bit. Even clip it a bit. I'm out of control. There we go. Yeah, that's okay. Let's filter it. Okay, that sounds alright. That's the full blast coming from the pattern data. Let's kill all of that. And let's try another means of achieving the same thing, because hey, it's good to have options. So what we did was we went through the high and the low notes. So that's the interval that I want. And I'm going to go to chord. I'm going to go dun, dun. Yeah, they're the intervals that I want for this custom chord, which I think is a second inversion. Suspended second. Andy, help me. You're a lecturer. Maybe it's a first version. Yeah, sus2 versus second inversion. It doesn't matter. And this is a really important one here because this is a good way to lose. To lose your original sample if you're not careful and you forgot to save because you're naughty. N here means new, and you click it, but you can't click it. You have to click here next to it to change it from N to O. O stands for original and N stands for new. So original means that the code we create here and mix here is going to be dumped in place of the original one, which will ruin your sample, which you might want to keep to make other chords, which is quite likely, especially if you're doing doskpop. You want a whole range of nice chords, triads, or suspensions. New will find the next free sample slot and dump it in there. So make sure you got one free. In theory, well, and in practice, it's pretty good. It hasn't bugged out on me yet. Chord, are you sure? Make chord. resampling, mixing samples. All right. Actually, this is a bit faster on a faster Amiga. It's a lot faster. Like, maybe it does see the, yeah, it does see the 03. It does see the 50 megahertz. It doesn't see the RAM. It never sees the RAM, but it does see a faster processor, a turbo board, or an accelerator card, accelerator board. This is a Phase 5 Blizzard 3, I think, or 30. Let's see how a sample sounds. Again, quite quiet. I could have boosted the amplitude of the original. In fact, it'd be a good idea to go and do that again. Let's kill that new sample that was made to see if we can get it sounding any nicer. Should have done all this on the doskpop stream, because a lot of this would make more sense. You're really relying on having pre-mixed chords that you can fit in tight spots when you're doing doskpop. But hey, it's all good. Let's do for this again. Let's bump up that volume as high as we can go without clipping. Maybe a bit higher. It's a tiny bit clipping there, but I don't care, because as we've established, I'm out of control. Now I'm going to go back to that chord, which remembers, luckily, what we did last time. It's not a feature, that's just like, it doesn't get cleared. We're on N for new again, so that's good. We're going to do a chord. Are you sure? Yeah. The end result should hopefully be a little bit nicer than it was before. A lower noise floor and a higher signal level. It's of a similar quality to the one we got from Mod to Samp. Of course, Mod to Samp will render exactly what it hears in your track. So you can do some real crazy stuff in the track and the pattern data and render that to a sample. That's often handy for all sorts of purposes. But for what we're doing right now, it's another option to achieve the same thing here. And it's the third option is a bit more, I mean, hey, it's all labor intensive, but it's now quite loud. It's this thing Mix. I wouldn't use Mix for this job, because if you mix, so you mix a sample with another sample. So firstly, you're not setting the pitch like you are in chord. It's just blending two samples together. So you could copy the sample and then change the pitch and then do all sorts of stuff to make that work. So I was wrong to call it an equivalent of what we've just done, because it's not. It's just for blending two samples together. A good use case for that is layering two drum loops or sticking shakers over a break, something like that. If you've got those two samples ready to go and you think, shit, I wish I could play these without having to use two channels, that's what that's for. You get a choice of which sample to mix and where to mix it to, and it's really easy to mess up and blast a sample that you want. So like everything else, save before you do it, save before you touch anything. Here be dragons. There's that new one. Let's go back and stick that. Now we can stick that sample in here. Won't sound great against the bass, but it's not going to sound great at all. But those sidechain commands we stuck in there, the fakey sidechain, do pretty much the same thing with a different sample. Actually, it tails out in quite a nasty way because of the way we mixed it. Remember that pitch is connected directly to time here, so if one of the notes in your chord was pitched higher, then it will finish quicker than the lower notes in the chord, so you'll hear it there. Not much way around that except to loop it. And the loop's not working properly. That doesn't matter, I'll just chop a big chunk out of there. I think it's really fighting with me throwing such big samples into it. Does it wrap if you have no spaces? Does what wrap if you have no spaces? Hey, if you've got an effect going on like volume commands jumping up and down, that sort of thing, they can really cover up a dodgy sample, dodgy loop point. And, you know, take those freebies wherever you find them, because chord generation to new instrument. I'm not sure. So let's have a look. Andy's asking if the chord thing wraps around. If you have no spaces and dump it in, do you mean sample spaces? Whether if you're on sample 31 and you want to make a chord and you say new, will it dump it in sample 1? I wouldn't like to be the one to find out the hard way that it doesn't, or that it does. Yeah, I'm not sure. I will try that out sometime and report back. So yeah, that's looping around fine now. But let's get our original sample back in there. What pitch did I have that in last time? Can't hear that bass very well through these headphones. Yeah, that's all right. Sorry. So I'll leave that where it is. I think we've covered everything that I wanted to cover last time. Didn't have time for. There are loads more commands that we haven't looked at yet, and in the same way that doing a non-chippy tune tonight was an easier way of showing off some of these sample editing, mixing features, chiptune would be an easier way to show off, or a better way to show off some of those other commands, especially things like arpeggio and stuff like that. So I think we'll stick a pin in the non-chip stuff for a while after tonight. You've seen me bringing in samples from disk that I've prepared earlier and converted, and I'll update you on Amiga Pal another time if anybody's interested. You've seen me using the filter and the boost, copying samples, duplicating them, so I've got a backup, keeping a backup sometimes in the buffer by just copying the whole thing in case the next thing I do goes horribly wrong, because there's no undo in the sample editor. That must be clear by now, but in case you missed it. And you've seen me learn new things, and the new thing I learned was, I forgot what it was. It was pretty cool though. Andy, can you remember what it was? I definitely learned it. Anyway, it was awesome. It might have been the increment position. No, it was deleting just, it was Alt Delete to delete just the command, but as long as you're in the note, yeah, just the effect command, but as long as you're in the note track. Alt and delete. Thank you. That's at least something as good. Something good has come out of tonight. And yeah, and you've seen quick and dirty ways to get a crossfade on the go. We haven't really spent time getting the perfect loop point, but we got the drums to sit the way they're supposed to sit, and also started to edit those. We'll come back in a distant future and look at how to go absolutely accurate on those drums. And in fact, I can't resist just getting an amen in while we're here right now, because it's ridiculous that there isn't one in this tune. This mod's a total mess now, but that's fine. Where did I put those Amen? Sure, I got a load of samples. Amen, an entire directory full of them. Let's get the volume is up. Okay, there we go. That was nice. Oh, that's very gentle, isn't it? Nice. So I'm after like a roller of an Amen sample rather than a really nice one that I would use for a breakdown, like this or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Let's get everything else muted. And remember the quick and dirty way of it's muted. Quick and dirty way of making sure that you've got the right pitch for your drum sample is just get some notes in and run the pattern, and repeat them at a point that you think makes sense for the pattern, which is usually the 8 for 4 to the floor time signature. It's usually the 8, 16, and 32 lines. That already sounds near close, but the whole sample lasts half the pattern, so we'll stick it in twice and roll it. Alright, so it needs to roll a bit faster than that. I think it might be semitone might be too much. Sorry, not fast, that's slower. Even faster than that, so pitch it up a bit more. Oh. A bit slower. So somebody's already had fun with this Amen, but you could. Hey Rob, thank you. Cool, glad it's sinking in. It's only just sinking in with me after all these years, and I'm learning new things that I just never knew. I wrote some of them down yesterday. Polyphonize block as a command not many people know about. So you can figure out what that is. So that's just throwing it on thick, and hey, then you can spread that out, spread those component parts out over 30 or 40 patterns, and introduce a few extra atmospheric samples, some breakdowns, maybe some bits of vocals and other nice sounds, all that kind of stuff. Hey, that's a more general approach to making a jungle or a drum and bass tune. But all those principles are what will get you there. What I haven't talked about, and again, this will be easier to do with chiptunes, is to talk about song structure, pattern lists, all that kind of stuff. Some of the special commands for jumping between positions and lines and patterns and stuff, which can let you do fun things with chiptunes. So yeah, it feels like a good time to end it. And the stream. I'm going to play out on a tune, I think. I'm going to save this one first. Okay. Who's in here? if I play a cartoon tune, if I play a tune by cartoon, I'll just leave it looping all night. Oh, such good tunes here. Oh, this is a really nice one by Looney. I think I'll play that. Yeah. I think it ends as well, like properly. It's got some weird stuff going on. Maybe that was written in Fast Tracker 2 or something. Gary and Denise are two chips in, I think, the A1000, and name of custom chips in the Amiga. And yeah, there we go. Good night. Thank you very much for Protracking with Syphus. I'll see you again next time.